Hi everybody, I'm Laura Hammock from the Marble Jar channel. This is the 6th and final video of my series on parenting internet kids, or how to raise kids in a digital world. This series talks about the good, the bad, and the ugly of technology for our kids and what we can do about it as parents. Today we'll be talking about some of the technology tools that you can use to help enforce your screen time rules. In the last video, we talked about the rules that you can put in place to limit screen time and content. In addition, we talked about the fact that if you aren't constantly vigilant about enforcing your rules, then you can have anarchy on your hands in a matter of minutes. Each of these rules requires some level of checking in occasionally or constantly for some kids, and I have one of those. Parents always start out with great intentions, but eventually life gets in the way and you realize the kids are sleeping with their phones. They are on their phones all day without having their chores done. They're downloading apps you don't know about. They're following a bunch of strangers on social media, and they're buying a ton of in-app purchases that are showing up on your credit card bill. Well, here's where I say that technology can actually help you out. Here are the tools that we're going to cover briefly. Apple ID, iPhone restrictions, OpenDNS, service provider, device-based controls, router-based controls, spyware, and social media monitors. Each of these is probably going to require a more in-depth video, so this will be kind of an overview. I'll try to put up some more specific videos and how-to information on each of these tools. So first, let's talk about Apple ID. You might think it's sort of strange to have Apple ID on this list, but it is one of my main tools to limit apps, view activity, and find my kids. It can also be a pain in the rear end, so make sure you're okay with the problems it presents if you decide to implement this. I require that my kids use my Apple ID. They don't get their own, and I don't tell them the password. Here are some of the things it helps with. It helps limit their app purchases. Having those apps download automatically on my device, having the ability to turn on their text messages on my device so that I can see the text without having to have their phone in my actual hand, using Find My iPhone to locate the phone sometimes, and actually a lot of times to locate my kid. So the next area that we're going to cover is iPhone restrictions. Again, my family all has Apple devices, which keeps things simple for us. I'm not as familiar with the restrictions functions for Android or Windows phones, but I'm sure they have implemented something similar. On an Apple phone, if you go to Settings and then General and then Restrictions, you can set restrictions for your child's iPhone or iPad. Remember, these restrictions are specific to that device, but they also cover when they're using Wi-Fi or using cellular data. So make sure you do the same restrictions on each device that they use regularly. Make a passcode, a restrictions passcode, that only you know to access this area. So you can do the following things. You can determine which apps you want your kids to have access to. You can filter content for movies and music and websites. You can limit the adult content or by age. You can give your child permission to install and delete apps or make in-app purchases. You can make certain information private. You can let your kid make changes to some basic phone functions. You can participate in Game Center or online gaming. And you can also set up a do not disturb schedule if you don't want them getting textings at night or during homework time. That's actually not in the restrictions section. That's in another place on the phone. The next tool we will cover is OpenDNS. So now you've set up your kid's phone so that it limits adult sites. All done, right? Wrong. What about the family computer or the one he or she uses for homework? One simple and free way to filter adult content is to use OpenDNS's free service called Family Shield. Here's how it works briefly. Basically, you change the DNS servers that your internet router uses. DNS stands for domain name servers. Every time you type a www address into your browser, your router sends information to preset DNS servers to translate that www address into IP addresses that the internet can understand to route your request. OpenDNS takes the place of the default DNS servers that are already programmed into your router. And that company maintains a list of forbidden sites. If you try to reach one of them, then it will send you back this message. Next, we'll cover cellular provided tools. Each service provider has a set of tools that you can use as a parent to control the access of the phones on your account. We have Verizon, that's our service provider, so I can only speak directly to their service, which is called Family Base. Most of them require a monthly fee. Ours is $5, totally worth it. Family Base has a bunch of control functions, but remember, they only really govern when your kid is using cellular data. So if they're hooked into Wi-Fi, which is most of the time for my kids, those controls don't work. So their service can report on texts, on phone calls, and contacts. It can limit cellular data or calls after a certain hour or during school when you think your kids should actually be focused on studying. Again, for us, this has limited utility since most activities are now done over Wi-Fi and data networks. We use Family Base pretty much only to limit data usage per month. If we didn't use this, I'd be paying $1,000 a month in overage charges. So you can limit each phone line to a specific amount of data. My kids both get 1.5 gigabytes. Once they've used all of that data, it shuts off their data until the cycle starts again the following month. If their data is off, they can still get phone calls and send SMS texts, but Find My iPhone only works if the phone is connected to a Wi-Fi network. Okay, so we've talked about Apple ID, iPhone restrictions, OpenDNS, and using the cellular provided tools. Now let's cover device and router-based controls. First, device-based controls. I'm not going to spend too much time on these since I ultimately decided against using these type of tools. But basically, this is software that you can install on each of your devices that your child uses that filters content and controls usage. You may have heard of some of these, NetNanny or Symantec. So you would need a Windows-based software for your computers or Mac software if you have Apple computers, and then a separate app for mobile or handheld devices. If your kids are getting content from Xbox or other video game platforms, you would have to find the controls within the platform itself, which may be a little clunky. You can see one of the drawbacks already, maintaining a lot of different software for each internet-connected machine. Plus, there's usually a monthly fee for this type of software, and smart kids can find ways around these if they are handy with technology, which, let's face it, they all are. Smartphones in particular are susceptible to workarounds by motivated kids using proxy sites. So I ended up going a different route. We use router-based controls. There are a lot of products in this area, but some of the best known are Circle by Disney, Torch, or the one we decided on, which was Koala Safe. These are hardware-based controls. The product's actually a working router, and here's how they work. First, let me show you a normal setup. You have a modem or Wi-Fi router, or in many cases, a router that performs both of these functions. In order to connect to the internet, all of your devices connect to the Wi-Fi, and voila! Everyone has total internet access, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Here's how the router-based internet controls work. You keep the original Wi-Fi setup for your needs and for the adults in the household, but you change the passcode to something only the adults in the house know. Then you plug, in my case, Koala Safe into the original router or router Wi-Fi combo, and that creates a brand new Wi-Fi network just for your kids, which has a passcode that you share with your kids. This allows you to control whatever device connects to it at a router level without having to mess with each device. Here's what you can do. You can set a schedule for internet access. You can only allow access when you turn it on using an app from your phone. You can filter content, and you can limit the apps they're using. You can also see a little bit of usage. With these, there's usually just a one-time cost for the hardware, which makes it attractive. Plus, it's a little harder for the kids to work around, although it's definitely possible. My son has figured out every way, including giving himself unlimited access when my phone is open, changing all the filters to allow everything, and using my phone as a hotspot to use cellular data. Oh, and that's another thing. This only works when your kids are connected to Wi-Fi at home, so not when they are at a friend's house or using cellular access. We use Koala Safe in conjunction with iPhone restrictions, for cellular content filtering and Verizon Family Base to limit cellular data use. Now let's talk briefly about spyware. This is device-based software that doesn't filter or control, but it records and reports, like a spy. On the PC side, these are programs like PC Pandora and Spectre Pro. There are also spyware apps for the iPhone and Androids. I've really only ever heard of these being used in pretty dire situations, like if you think your teen is in danger or being bullied, or maybe even the aggressor in that situation. Usually they don't know they're being watched. If you don't have that kind of situation, I think it's probably best to attempt to limit internet content and just let them know that you plan to take their phones periodically to check in. So the last area I've been asked about is social media monitors. As most of us know, if your kid is using Snapchat or any other temporary social media where the messages delete themselves after a couple of seconds, it's impossible to know exactly what is being said unless your kid screenshots the message. And they are very hesitant to do this since the sender knows immediately if something that they sent has been screenshot. There are some tools to monitor social media like NetNanny Social and mSpy, but they have a monthly fee and they require full cooperation from your kids. Like they have to share all their usernames and passwords for all of their accounts. And even then, I don't think these services cover Snapchat, just services like Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, which would be reasonably easy to monitor if you friended your kid on all of those services. So that's an overview of the technology tools that you can use to help support the internet rules that you institute. Again, that was a very high-level view. Look for more individual, detailed videos on each topic to be posted later. Here's what we talked about. Apple ID, iPhone restrictions, OpenDNS, service provider, device-based controls, router-based controls, spyware, and social media monitors. Just to wrap up the entire series, the most important element of parenting internet kids is communication. Set aside your ego. In other words, don't institute rules just because it makes you look like a tough parent. You'll lose credibility and trust from your kids. Also, really listen to what they have to say. Their world is different than the one that we grew up in. Their norms are different. Let them persuade you with convincing arguments. This will not undermine your authority. In fact, it might make them respect you more if they see that you're able to take into account new information and shift your views accordingly. And the most important thing is to check your values and make sure you communicate them to your kids. What do you value most? Empathy, self-reliance, creativity, intimacy. Those are some of mine, but yours may be very different. Make sure your rules and suggestions reflect the values that you see as important. So that wraps up the 6-part series on parenting internet kids. I hope you got something good out of it. If so, let me know in the comments section. And stay tuned for more in-depth videos on some of the topics covered. Thanks so much for watching.